Hey guys, we are going to use scientific notation to subtract some really, really small numbers, okay? So to do this, you just need to be pretty comfortable with scientific notation and also know how to subtract decimals. If you need to review on either of those things, I will link some videos in the corner for you. But let's go ahead and get started with this. So these are numbers in scientific notation. When we have the negative exponent, that means we're moving our decimal to the left. So these are really small numbers, right? So scientific notation can make it easier to add and subtract them. So when our exponents are the same, we can just go ahead and subtract these numbers and then multiply them by the same thing, 10 to the negative fourth power. Okay. When they are different, we need to make a couple adjustments that I will show you. So we will do that on our second example here. Okay. All right. So these ones, like we already said, they're the same. So I'm just going to go ahead and take 8.291 and subtract 3.17. Okay. So 8.291. We're going to subtract 3.17. When we subtract decimals, we line up the decimals, and I can put a little 0 there just so it lines up nicely, right? All right, so then we do 1 minus 0 gives me 1. 9 minus 7 is 2. 2 minus 1 is 1. Drop my decimal down, and 8 minus 3 gives me 5. Okay, so I end up with 5.121 times 10 to the negative fourth power. Okay, and that is my answer. Okay, so when the exponents are the same, it's pretty easy, right? When they're different, it's not too bad. We just have to make a slight adjustment before we subtract these, okay? So I need them to be the same, just like they were up here, okay? So I can either get them both to be 10 to the negative fourth or both 10 to the negative sixth. It's kind of personal preference, which one you want to do. So let's go ahead and get them both to be in 10 to the negative sixth power, okay? So when I do that, that means this one is good to go, right? It is already 10 to the negative sixth, okay? But this one, we want to change so that instead of being 10 to the negative fourth, it's 10 to the negative sixth, okay? So this is when we just have to kind of think about it a little bit. If I were converting this back to standard notation, I would move this decimal over to the left 4 times, right? Because of that negative 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, okay? And that would be where my decimal would be, okay? So if I want it to be in 10 to the negative sixth power, that means I'm getting further away from that spot I want to be, right? So if I move it, I'm going to use a different color so it stands out a little bit. So if I move my decimal, instead of going that way, if I move it this way 2 spots, then I'm going to be times 10 to the negative sixth power, okay? Hang with me if you're like, what is she talking about? So we've got 563 times 10 to the negative sixth power. Sorry, that is not lined up the most beautifully. Just pretend it is, okay? So why is that now 10 to the negative 6? Because right now my decimal's right here, right? So if I were to move it over 6 times to the left, right, I would end up in that same spot, which is where I want to be. So these two are the same. They just look a little different, right? Okay, so now they are both in 10 to the negative sixth power. So I can go ahead and subtract these, okay? So again, I'm going to line up my decimals. So I've got 563, which doesn't look like it has a decimal, but if it doesn't look like that, that just means it's on the end, right? And I can put a 0 here, right? And then we are subtracting 2.6, making sure we line those decimals up, okay? Now I'm going to subtract. So I've got 0 minus 6, so I got to borrow, right? So I get 2, 10, so I get 4. Drop that decimal down. 2 minus 2 gives me 0, and then I've got the 6 and the 5, okay? So I end up with 560.4 times 10 to the negative sixth. Now you might be tempted to say, sweet, I'm done, but not quite. Okay. So for something to truly be in scientific notation, we only want one number in front of the decimal, right? So we want to move this guy again back 2 places. Okay. So that just that 5 is in front of it. So if I am moving back 2, I'm getting closer to that point, right? If I went over 6 to the left, that would be where I want to be. So when I move to the left 2, I'm getting closer. So it is going to be 10 to the negative 4th again, okay? And my decimal here will be 5.604, okay? So just make sure if your answer doesn't have the decimal where it needs to be, that you move it and adjust your exponent accordingly, okay? All right, if you need adding or multiplying or dividing, I'm going to link a playlist with lots of other scientific notation videos if you need them. But hopefully this made sense. Thanks. Bye.